YouTube vinyl community, Led Zeppelin fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about Led Zeppelin's second album, Led Zeppelin 2, released at the end of 1969. This is probably one of the best ways to get into the band, if you ask me. This was my first total foray into Led Zeppelin myself when I was in high school and I was about 14 or 15 years old. It features some of their most classic rock radio staples like Whole Lotta Love, What Is and What Should Never Be, Ramble On, Heartbreaker. I mean, there's a lot of classic songs on this thing. And I thought, you know what, it'd be fun to talk about this. I haven't delved too much into 70s rock yet, so let's try out some, well, this is 69, but let's try out some Zeppelin for a while. I used to be really big into these guys, and it was a long time since I've heard this whole album in full. So this was really fun to revisit, and I'm glad I did because it brought back so many memories. It brought back so many so many memories of me trying to play guitar in high school, trying to emulate some of these songs, and just reliving some of these songs. So this was a lot of fun to go back into. But this album was recorded really sporadically over the course of like 7 or 8 months in 1969. And over the course of different studios between London, Vancouver, LA, it was all over the place. So they would do like a vocal in London and then do a harmonica overdub in Vancouver and then do like the backing track in New York. I mean, they were all over the place with this thing. So it was recorded in between tours. Basically, they'd come up with some jams on stage and say, oh, that was a good riff. Let's go back in the studio and do that. But also Jimmy Page was just loaded with riffs at this point. So he kind of like had a plethora of things to use. And this album showed a giant leap in their songwriting abilities too. Zeppelin 1 is an absolutely fantastic album, most of it rooted in blues. This album definitely has its blues roots too, but it's also showing them write more rock songs that would become their own style. So, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant started writing more together. Robert Plant started writing more songs on his own, showing off lyrics to songs like Thank You, and What Is and What Should Never Be, Ramble On. Like, he was getting really comfortable with writing songs. Because during the first album, he felt like he wasn't really a match for this band. He thought he was not going to be in the band forever. He thought like, all right, I'll sing this thing. It's kind of not my thing, but I'll do it. And then he ended up, writing some more songs with them and realized, okay, maybe I am a better fit. And things just started to gel and it really worked. So it's funny because for a band that was so on top of the world at this point, they were doing they did 3 or 4 tours of Europe and America in that year, in '69. So they were insanely busy. And they were just taking over the world by storm. This was like one of the heaviest rock albums of all time when it came out, if not the heaviest at that time. So yeah, it's just a fantastic listen. But being in stereo also really helps because let's jump into the first track here, Whole Lotta Love. This song was made for stereo. When you hear the sounds bouncing from left to right, the speakers there, it's so fun. But it really shows their versatility because not only is this riff just such a cool, slinky kind of guitar riff, the way the drums shuffle, the way John Paul Jones' bass kind of leaps in and out of this thing, it's a real cool, funky kind of rock sound. And then Robert's voice on top of it all, just screaming his ass off in his Robert Plant way. Very fun to listen to. But the middle bit, where things get kind of wild, literally, Eddie Kramer is on this thing. He does the production on this thing. This is one of the first job, or engineering, I'm sorry. This is one of his first engineering jobs, who would go on to work with every band ever after this. But him and Jimmy Page were basically in the control booth kind of playing with knobs, just kind of fiddling about, because there's all kinds of sweeps and dynamic shifts, and it really sounds good on a good set of speakers or headphones. Hearing it on a laptop or something, or it doesn't do it. You need to play it through a good stereo to get the full effect. But and it's cool because the tape itself had bleed through, and that means they were recording other tracks onto the same tape. And so there's moments where you hear Robert kind of singing on top of himself, and that just added to the creative atmosphere. At one point, Eddie turned to Jimmy Page and he was like, "Hey, do you like what I did? I threw some echo onto his voice from the bleed-in track." And Jimmy was like, "Yep, great, keep it, fine." One of those magic moments of rock and roll history that just works. When mistakes happen, sometimes that's the best little surprise of a rock song, or any song really. But Yeah, this song is just an absolute jam. You know, it goes on for a couple of minutes there, and the drums are so fun. They have a really nice production on the drums. I love the snap to the snare, the deep, echoey tom fills, and the washing of the cymbals is very cool. It's very crystal clear. So the mixing on this album is particularly striking. And the production overall is a very, very well produced disc for being done in several different locations across the globe. It's got a really concise, cohesive feel to it, which is kind of an interesting trick to pull off, let alone in one studio, doing it in several studios. So very, very cool there. The next track, What Is and What Should Never Be, this is a song that definitely shows the growth of the band from not just being a blues rock band or a hard rock band, but a band that can throw dynamics in. So here's some acoustic guitars, here's some different shifts, here's a quieter section, here's some build-up, here's some crunchiness. Like, there's a lot of sections of this song that really make a difference to show they can write more, not intelligent songs, but just more sophisticated songs. So they were branching out from like the 2 or 3 chord thing and kind of just playing straightforward rock to writing a bunch of different arrangements for the verses or for the middle 8 or for the bridge or middle 8 or same thing. Come on, Giggens, get with it. But it's fun to hear them grow like that, and especially with their songwriting and the storytelling that was developing at the same time. So songs like this prove that they were just more than Dazed and Confused or whatever. The Lemon Song. Here we go. This is a straight up blues rock song. I mean, this is totally out of the canon of just like what your average blues song would be about. You know, it's filled with innuendo. But that said, it's a really, really fun song. I love the echoey guitar, the wow, 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 wow. Very cool. So like, you know, they put effects onto the blues rock to make it sound distinct, and totally creating a sound all their own. There was nobody else that sounded like this at that time. So, but the thing is, like, when you add that element, and then of course it's always, you know, whatever that phrase is, greater than the sum of its parts. Each member of the band adds their own little special ingredient to make something that could be taken away as a throwaway. Oh, it's a blues rock track. When you have 4 insanely talented people in the room at the same time, putting their little tricks onto a song, and being as talented as they were, when you hear John Bonham snap in on his drums, and then John Paul Jones slides in with the bass, and then Jimmy Page keeps up with his guitar, and then Robert Plant comes in and just completely wails over this thing, the whole baby, baby, baby stuff, it makes for a really interesting listen. And the parts where it picks up, and it speeds up, and slows down, I mean, very, very fun track to listen to. And then you get Thank You, which is a really, really interesting song as well, because mostly acoustic. Robert wrote it for his wife at the time, and it's a really sweet, loving, endearing song. It's just, I remember reading somewhere in high school he wrote the lyrics on the back of a napkin somewhere. I can't remember if that's true or not, but I remember seeing that somewhere in a magazine. There was like Guitar World or something back then. I also feel like the intro riff was kind of later borrowed from some other bands, like that song Can't You See What That Woman She Does to Me. Whoever's saying that was a Marshall Tucker band, that sounds a lot like Thank You, so I wonder if there was an influence there. I'm sure there was, but it's just a nice soft song to show that they were capable of doing that. You know, the chorus itself, it doesn't go into like an explosive chorus. There are moments where it gets a little more harder for sure, but the whole like Little Drops of Rain kind of stuff, like, really is, it's elevated from the rest of the song, but not in like a, we're throwing this in your face. It's kind of like just a lift up, which piques your attention because the rest of the songs are so much in your face. Yeah, just a nice track to listen to. The fade out was cool. I like how the coda kind of like gets quiet and then it kind of comes back. The original pressings of the album, including this one, all mentioned the song being 3 minutes and 50 seconds, when really it's a lot longer, but they chopped it off at that mark there right before the coda happens. So someone was asleep on the job at Atlantic Records on that day. Side 2 opens with Heartbreaker. I mean, holy crap, what can you say about this thing besides that insane riff? I mean, it's such a cool riff. And then the drums kick in with that slight march feel to them, and the bass is bouncing up and down. It's got a couple of shifts going up and down in terms of like the key change. And then, you know, you get like the really quick stabs during the verses when Robert's singing. You know, quick explosive stabs between the cymbals on the drums and the guitars doing their thing. But the syncopation of it all, syncopation of it all, between the verses with the singing and the musicality of it mixed together. They bounce really well. Like the mark is hit each and every time. And the cool thing is about the guitar solo. This is right when Jimmy Page started using the whole Les Paul Marshall amp thing, and that guitar solo was added later on as an afterthought. That wasn't part of the original recording. He kind of like messed around with his new setup, and they flew that in to be a part of that song. So there's a little fun fact for you. But that solo itself, there's parts where you can hear him like slightly mess up, but I like that it's got that live feel to it, like the no overdub kind of mentality. But I mean, once you kick back into that groove again, this was just such an interestingly. It sounds simple, but it's got such a cool, complex vibe in the sense that the performing of those particular chords and the way they're displayed and set up really makes for a, I hate to use the word slinky feel again, but it's got that like total blues, like it just oozes musicality. It sounds so easy, but it's totally not. It's like the Cars. Like a lot of their songs sound easy, but they're not. And then you kick back into that again. It's just this fast, up-paced rock and roll vibe, splashing on the cymbals again. Great song. There's live versions of this thing that are just absolutely awesome, like the How the West Was Won album. That version of Heartbreaker is particularly great. Living, Loving, Made. When I was growing up, this song always played after Heartbreaker on the radio. I think this is what they did. It's kind of like We Are the Champions and We'll Rock You were paired together on the radio as well. This song was never played live by Led Zeppelin. Robert Plant did it on his own in 1990 when he was playing shows, but Jimmy Page always considered this one of his least favorite Zeppelin songs, which blows my mind. It's a really fun song. It's got a great riff to it, a total pop rock kind of feel, like it's ready for radio. It's a great little track. It's got a nice guitar solo that's kind of like a separation from the rest of the stuff on the album because it's not super fuzzy. It's a very clean kind of guitar on this one. And it's one of the few songs that feature Jimmy Page doing backup vocals. Very cool. We don't get that a whole lot, so I like that a lot. But Robert's cool little vocal ad-libs that he does throughout this thing are great. It's just a fun song, and I've used that a lot. I've used that term a lot in this review, that it's a fun song. But like, they made music that was just enjoyable, that you would put it on and have a good time listening to it, because it's only rock and roll, man. Ramble on. Who knew that Lord of the Rings would make a fun subject matter to write a song about, or at least throw in a verse or two about them? But this is another track that Robert Plant. He was they were both big fans of J.R.R. Tolkien's writing, and so they kind of threw in bits of Lord of the Rings into this thing as well. But very, very fun. This was one of my first Zeppelin songs I ever heard. So this song for me personally takes me back to being like 14, 15 years old and hearing this for the first time and loving all the double-tracked voices at the end where Robert's basically singing over himself. I love the pitter-patter drum in the background, which is probably John on like a guitar case or his lap or something. I like that feel. The bass on this song is particularly interesting because it's all over the place. It's walking up and down. I think John Paul Jones needs to be recognized as a more important bass player, because this song in particular shows off his skills very well. But the chorus of this song is so classic. It's got this big rock energy. It's just like that fist pumping kind of song. It's just a really, really cool track. There's like that guitar solo that sounds like a violin that's, kind of like inquisitive and weary. It sounds like it's trying to discover new territories. Kind of like if you were walking through Mordor and you saw Gollum. You're on that journey with them. You're rambling on. Very cool. Moby Dick, this was John Bonham's, basically his showcase. It's an instrumental track with a little bit of riffing in the beginning from three of the guys and ending with three of the guys. But the middle bit is all John Bonham. And he starts off most of this thing by playing with his hands on the drums, which is a great video of that if you have the Led Zeppelin DVD. I think it's live at the Albert Hall, 1969 or 70. I forget what year it was, but they have a long clip of him doing that, where he get like bloodied up and stuff. Very fun to watch, very hard to do yourself. I used to do that a lot myself too, but he is much better. So very fun to hear him riff, because his style of drumming is so... If you take Keith Moon, who is very much all over the place and very fun to listen to, taking John Bonham and putting him in that mix, he's a much more controlled player, and his fluidity is a lot easier to digest. So he can do a lot and be showy, but he's very controlled in his madness. So whereas he can do a lot of like fills and triplets and stuff with the bass pedal and the toms. His fills are a lot more, I hate to say the word like meaty or substantial, but they're a little more polished, I guess you can say, compared to Keith Moon. Even though Keith is easily my favorite drummer of all time, but yeah, John Bonham had a certain precision to his execution that I think sets him apart from other drummers, and he was absolutely fantastic. The amount of speed that he can do, the amount of depth and dynamics he was able to come across, even with his hands, but particularly with sticks. You know, he was a drummer's drummer. Barely ever was he touching the cymbals on this thing. It's just the drums, which for me, that's what you, if you're a drummer, there's like 1 or 2 cymbals here and there. You don't like 1,000 cymbals. Come on, play the drums. But I love that song. And Bring It On Home, this track is cool. It starts off sounding like an old-timey blues song before jumping into a crazy rock riff. Very, very, very fun riff. There, I said it again. Straight out of the Led Zeppelin canon. It sounds like Led Zeppelin. Then ends back with the original refrain from the beginning with a harmonica, kind of sound like an old-time radio there. But yeah, I really, really dig this album. It's, like I said, it's been a long time since I've heard it. And it was a hell of a lot of fun to jump back into and kind of rediscover. But here's the gatefold. And you'll notice that the tracks, they all list basically the band members as having written all the songs. Throughout the next, 15 to 20 years after this album came out, they had lawsuits and all kinds of stuff against them saying, like, oh, nope, that's Willie Dixon, nope, that's Sonny Boy Williamson, that's Muddy Waters, like, there's stuff all over the place, and now everything's been amended to show the other writers, because Led Zeppelin was pretty classic for borrowing or using their inspiration, on their records to say that guy, oh, we wrote this, but we were inspired by these guys, so it's rock and roll. Bob Dylan did it all the time, too. But, yeah, it's a classic album. It really plays like a greatest hits album. There isn't a bad song on it. Here's the back cover. Actually, this is a continuation of the front cover, so let me open it up this way for you. So that's pretty cool. The guy who did the album cover won a Grammy Award for it. I think it was a Grammy Award, but this is actually a World War I photograph where they superimposed a bunch of other faces and put the guys in Led Zeppelin down there too. But, yeah, there's not much else to say about this thing besides it's a great record. I'd probably give this thing a 9 out of 10. It's a fantastic album. I think it's the best way to get into Led Zeppelin because it's got enough of their hooks, enough of their good crunchy guitars, and it really shows off their strengths. They were on fire when they recorded this because they were playing live so much. So, like, when they went to the studio, there was, like, an urgency to just, like, finish off a couple of hours and go back on tour, play some more shows. So they had to get this album done, and because of that, it shows how top-notch they were. They could work under such pressure and still create something really, really long-lasting. And it says something to the production methods of this thing, too, that it still sounds as fresh today as it did in 1969, I would think. I wasn't there for it, but, when you hear that riff of Whole Lotta Love start, or when you hear Heartbreaker, it just bleeds out of your speakers, and it sounds so in your face. It doesn't sound dated at all. It sounds so, like, this is the stuff that makes you want to pick up a guitar and play. Or drums or bass or learn how to sing. Like, they were a group of very, very talented guys who knew what they were doing really well and did it really well. So, yeah, at one point, I would have said this was my favorite Zeppelin album. I think I reserved that for Zeppelin 3 because I really like the feel on that one. Tangerine and all those songs. So I'm going to do that one soon, too. But Led Zeppelin 2, yeah, let's go with an 8 or 9 out of 10 on this one. Let's go with a 9. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. Good job, Zeppelin. My name is Giggens. This has been Album Reviews with Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin 2 on Atlantic Records, 1969. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.